Hello my MGTOW brothers, back again in for another video, and in this one we're going to close out the male side of the psyche, our inner marriage series. In this one we're going to call it, as promised, Inner Marriage and the Hero's Journey. But before we get started, I want to give you a bit of Gnostic wisdom that my teacher gave me some 20 some odd years ago. It's a quote from his favorite book, Stolen Legacy by James. And this quote is apropos for not only the series but this video that we're about to explore. This is the esoteric definition of magic. The qualities or attributes of entities, human or divine, are distributed throughout their various parts, and contact with such entities releases those qualities. I thought that this particular quote would go well when we're talking about the process of inner marriage, which includes individuation, which is something that we touched on in our last video. If you remember this diagram, Jung's diagram of the psyche, in the last video I said each one of those particular points were gateways or doors, and to get in touch with them you had to go through each door sequentially. The persona first, which is our outer mask or our interface with the rest of the world. The ego second, which is the eye behind our eyes, which is the conscious control of the psyche. The shadow, which is our utility closet or our automatic pilot, if you will. The anima or animus, depending on your sex, is the inner soul or the inner opposite soul that lives within inside of you, that minority of cells that live inside of you that reflects the opposite sex. And finally, the center of the self, which is the hidden part of you, that is basically controls everything else, the whole body. This is the nervous center. Now if you think about the quote that we just had, the quote that we just did, the qualities entities are distributed through the parts. So the qualities of your psyche are distributed through these particular 5 parts according to Jung. And to release those qualities, those positive qualities, you have to get in touch with them. You have to actually touch them. You have to actually be aware of them consciously. So the ego, which some people call it the flashlight or the fingers, the conscious fingers, the thing that you actually have control over, has to actually examine these parts by making contact with them. Like I said, the first 2 parts, itself and the persona, it has direct control over. You have direct control over your personality, your persona, because that's what is exhibited to the outside world. Obviously the ego you're always in contact with, because that is the you that's looking out on the world. The tougher parts are the unseen parts, which is the shadow, which is your utility closet, which is the operating system that runs your psyche in the background. And through that is the anima, which is the opposite soul that carries your female traits, that whispers to you unconsciously. And then to the self, which you don't have direct contact with, but which is where the ideas, thoughts, actions, and feelings get embedded, and then once they mature they come out the other way and into the real world. So when preparing for this particular video, I tried to think of a better way to describe this process to where it would make sense not only to me but to everybody else. And I was thinking that the shadow serves as an automatic pilot. So that led me to thinking about an airplane. And the airplane that came into my consciousness was the 747. So I likened the self, or the psyche, to the jumbo jet 747. You can see the various parts where the captain sits in the cockpit, and the cockpit is the shadow, and behind it is the elephant, which is the jumbo jet that the ego sits inside of and controls, or has conscious control of. If you look at a picture of the cockpit of a 747 where the captain sits, you see a myriad of handles, controls, dials, gauges, and whatnot. It's just a bizarre amount of different controls. And the first thing I thought is there's no way that one person could control or adjust all those little knobs and devices and settings while handling that airplane, this airplane that's the size of 3 football fields, until you realize that most of these settings are preset and is handled in the background by the automatic pilot, the automated computer system for this plane. In fact, the plane couldn't fly without the computer system. And that cockpit, or that control system, represents the interface of the shadow. The shadow is all those little control systems that actually fly the plane and monitor the different systems in the plane. And the only way that the pilot can actually fly this plane is through that cockpit. And the same thing with the ego. The only way the ego can drive the elephant or drive the plane is through the shadow. The shadow is your automatic pilot. You go into the shadow, you interface the shadow through the controls, and that's how you adjust yourself to the outside world. Just like a pilot, he has to learn what all those little dials do, all those little settings are. You know, the touch and the handling of the engines through the joystick and through the throttle. Each one of those dials brings out a quality of the shadow or the automatic pilot for the airplane, just as each one of the little quirks and intimacies that are in your shadow, inside your psyche, brings out different qualities about why you do things and why things happen in your life. Now, some people need a psychiatrist because they say it can be dangerous to go inside the shadow, inside those fine settings without training. Some people take a long, arduous process by reading and observing and learning different things. MGTOW is one of those learning things where you learn about the nature of people or nature of the shadow. And the only way to actually learn what these things do is to take the shadow off of automatic pilot and actually make these adjustments yourself. That's what MGTOW is about. It's about going off of the automatic pilot and making these little fine adjustments in yourself, and it is a rough process. A master pilot knows all the settings and all the little touches and all the little quirks of the airplane. He knows what the automatic pilot is and is not supposed to do, so he can make the fine adjustments to it. That's the same thing with a mature man. This is having a mature inner masculine, is being that captain and making those little fine adjustments. And once you do that, then you go through the shadow and you go back into the cabin. And who is in control of the cabin? The flight attendants are in control of the cabin. They're the ones that take care of the nest or the passengers, because your reason of being, the whole reason for the plane's being, is that self, that nest, those passengers that are inside, because that's what you're trying to deliver from one place to another. These are the things that get on the plane and off the plane, and you have to do it, protect them, feed them, and do it safely. Now, while the captain is in control of what comes in and goes on the plane, he leaves the majority of that caretaking to who? The anima, or the flight attendant. And if you have a good flight attendant a good flight attendant staff, the customers or the passengers are well taken care of and well behaved and well handled. She can handle most of the chores, problems that arise inside the cabin. So the thing is, you have to develop and get to know your flight attendant. You have to develop that flight attendant or that anima to the point where it can nurture and take control and caretake those passengers while you, the captain, are up there driving the plane. You're in a masculine in a successful intermarriage, because that's what this is. The flight is a successful intermarriage between the flight attendant, the staff, and the captain. A good captain has the ultimate control over what goes on his airplane and what doesn't. No passenger, no cargo, or anything else can get onto the plane without the captain's permission. And that is your inner masculine. That is your ego. That makes sure and is attentive of what comes in and what goes out. And once it's inside the plane and back inside the cabin, then that's where your staff or your flight attendant, your anima, takes over, and it nurtures and it protects what's inside. And for her to do her job properly, you have to communicate with your flight attendant or your anima. You have to know what qualities she has, and a good captain will encourage these qualities and will use those qualities and let her do her job. So what are the female traits that make a good anima or a good female flight attendant? One, she's got to be nurturing. So by that same token, do you allow yourself to nurture your ideas? Do you give your ideas and your wants and your desires a chance to fulfill themselves? Secondly, a woman wants to be listened to. She also wants to have your trust. Your anima or your woman, a good woman, has good intuition. Do you listen to your inner anima when she's trying to tell you something? You know, that little voice that tells you to turn right instead of left? Or that intuition that tells you when there's somebody that's not good for you? That's your anima talking to you. And if you don't listen to her and you don't trust her, she won't grow. And if she doesn't grow and doesn't feel confident, then your inner marriage will be a poor one. That feeling in your gut comes from her. It doesn't come from the masculine side. It comes from the feminine side. That's your inner feminine giving you a heads up. Just like a good wife would. A good wife is supposed to use her emotional intelligence and her intuition to give you that advice, that sage advice. But she will only do it if you trust and confide in her. Do you confide in your anima, or do you blow it off? Do you blow off that inner voice, or do you take time to develop it and develop that relationship? Because she's not always right, and the only time way you're going to find out when she's right and when she's wrong is to actually put it into action. You got to take risk with her. And the last thing is that the woman wants to be protected, just like your anima wants to be protected, just like your flight attendant wants to protect. She wants to be sure that whatever emergency comes up on that plane, that you can handle. The same thing with your anima. She wants to be sure that you're going to protect her and protect your offspring, which is your ideas and your dreams and your wishes. How hard do you fight to protect your own dreams, your wishes, and your own desires? Do you put them aside to fulfill somebody else's wishes, dreams, and desires, and neglect your own? A truly independent man, a truly fulfilled man with a mature and complete anima protects and fulfills his ideas, his wishes, and his desires. Your anima takes your passion and your excitement, and she multiplies it and gives it back to you. And she takes that passion and excitement, and that's what she feeds your ideas, your desires, and your actions with. A woman desires passion in her relationship with a man. your anima does too. That's what fuels her. That's what feeds her. That's what makes her go above and beyond the call of duty. Your protection and your commitment to your inner self, to your inner anima, is what makes a successful intermarriage. Now, as promised, we're going to tie the intermarriage, the stuff we just went through, to the hero's journey, to give you some tools on how to quote-unquote manifest. Now, the first chart that we're going to pull up is something that my teacher gave us some years ago. And this is the diagram on how to manifest an idea. And we're going to tie this into intermarriage. Okay, you can see it is basically what he says is a 7-step or 7-fold diagram to take an idea to manifestation. Now we start with an idea that enters from the universe or outside the psyche through the persona in various ways, and it gets recognized as an ego, as a new idea. Now the ego recognizes this as a viable idea, and then it gets passed to the shadow, put into the shadow, into the darkness, where your fears and your hopes and all those other things are that lie, and it gets challenged. Once it passes the challenge, it gets passed on to your anima to have a decision made of whether this idea is viable or viable as an offspring. She will then plant the seed or the offspring into the self, where it can grow, where she can feed it and nurture it. She nurtures the seed or the offspring into what we call a plant, a mature plant, and she continues to feed it until that plant turns into a fruit. Now, once it's in this stage, it's a ripe and mature fruit. It is ready. It's a ready idea for a tool that the ego, or what we call the fingers of the psyche, can actually pick that fruit or harvest that fruit, and then push it out through the persona and out into the real world, where it can be manifested, where it can actually do some real work. Now, how do you say that? Does that tie into intermarriage, or the intermarriage? You have to remember that you, as a man, that ego is the I. That ego is the masculine, the inner masculine within you. And its job, the ego's job, is to put that new idea into the challenge stage and protect it. Now, if the ego or the inner masculine has enough confidence and enough passion to protect that idea and provide for that idea, when that idea is passed to the anima in the decision phase, she will look not at the idea, but she will look at the passion and the commitment behind that idea that she sees from your inner masculine, or from the ego. If she'd see that your ego or your inner masculine will not protect or provide for that offspring, she'll abort it, just like in the real world. If a woman doesn't think that the baby or that fetus is going to be viable or can be provided for or protected, she will abort it. A lot of times, if you don't have a successful intermarriage with your anima, or you don't have a good relationship with your anima, this is where a lot of times that your anima will abort your ideas. You know, if you don't have confidence in them, if you say you want to, say, be in a rock band and you want to be a guitar player, but you don't have the commitment or the passion to actually do the practice and work all those hours and all those years to be successful, your anima will see that, will detect it, because she has intuition, and she will abort that baby. You might do it for a while, but eventually that idea will get aborted. She won't plant it, and she won't provide for it, and she won't nurture it. So this is where that inner masculine and that energy your inner anima feeds off of. So the thing is, where do your ideas go? Do you have the courage to see them through? Do you have the conviction and commitment? Have you built that trust up with your anima that you will see an idea through? If you don't, what happens to your ideas? The world will come in, and all your fears will come in, and then will destroy it. And your anima won't take that chance. There's lots of ideas, a lot of things she has to care for, so she's not going to waste her time and energy to provide for an offspring that you don't feel passionate about. Now, say you do pass that stage where the anima accepts it and she does plant it into yourself, and she agrees to nurture it and protect it and provide for it. You still have to give her the energy. You still have to give her the passion to sustain it, because that's what she feeds off of. She doesn't bring it herself. It's sustained by your ego. It's sustained by your inner masculine and your conviction. And the better, the more adult and mature that your inner masculine or your outer self is, the stronger that she'll be, and the more trust that she'll put into you. And she will see that seed into a plant. And once that plant is grown, your passion and your conviction will sustain it, and she will mature it into a fruit. And once it's in a fruit, it's still in the shadow, and it still has to be protected until it's harvested. And that's when your inner masculine in a successful marriage will pluck that fruit and skillfully use it and manifest it into whatever your hopes or your passion is. This is the diagram of a perfect inner marriage, where your anima, your female side, and your masculine side, which is your ego, work in harmony together. Will talk with each other, will trust each other, because you have to trust your inner side, your inside, to your flight attendant or to your woman. And your woman has to trust you that you will protect her and her babies. If there's trust between you two, and trust is developed over a lot of time, a lot of trial and error, you have to do inner work with yourself. Do you trust yourself? Do you have enough conviction that your ideas are viable, and you will see those ideas through? Now, here's a bonus for my subscribers, and you probably won't see this anyplace else except here, because this is my own idea and this is my own insight. My teacher always used to go back to what he called the Yad Ilahi. He called this the Jewish tree of life, or they call this the Kabbalah. And I was always curious about how to make the Kabbalah usable. Now, after some study and some research, I learned that the Kabbalah has 10 Sephara. Well, that's obvious, 10 Sephara, which are different qualities or powers. And I looked at it and I said, okay, there's 4 powers that are in the middle. And I said, what if I made those 4 powers, instead of different qualities, I made them levels, or levels of energy? I said, what would be left? You would have 6 outside Sepharas on each side, 3 male and 3 female. So I took the 4 inside Sepharas and made them levels, and I made the 3 pairs on the outside and divided them into male and female, one for each side, and I married it with the diagram that we just used, and this is the result that I had. Something that is very similar to the diagram of manifestation, and it is very, very relevant to what we went through as far as the inner marriage, the blending of the male and the female energies. But the Sepharas and the Kabbalah are a religion unto themselves, and it is way outside the scope of this video and this channel. So, me not wanting to turn this into a religious channel, we won't get into it because it is, like I said, it's way outside of the scope of what we're talking about. But it's something interesting to think about, and it shows you how these religions and these beliefs interrelate, and how you can use the philosophies from each one of them to actually use in your life to manifest. So with that, what we're going to do now is we're going to get into the hero's journey. Now, this is a diagram of Joseph Campbell's A Hero's Journey. And at first glance, it doesn't look anything like the diagrams we have used as far as the intermarriage. But if you look at this diagram with a Gnostic eye, you can actually start to see the steps, and you actually can start to see the different pieces that are very, very similar to what we just went through. If you look at the known and the unknown, the majority of the hero's journey is the unknown, and that relates directly to the diagrams we've seen from Jung as far as the outer self and the inner self. The inner self is much larger than the outer self. The unknown is much larger than the known. So if we use our diagram of manifestation to relate it to intermarriage, is that the call to adventure is the idea, and that is the first step. The first step, it goes to the ego for the supernatural aid, and the supernatural aid recognizes, the ego recognizes it as a new idea, and it joins with the inner masculine threshold and guardians and goes into the unknown, or into the underworld, into the shadow world. And you can see that it's on the threshold of transformation, because now look what's happening. It's being challenged and going through temptations. And this is where your mature inner masculine, remember I was telling you that your mature inner masculine has to protect and give passion to that idea. You can see it, the mentor and the helper. That is your inner masculine doing its work by protecting and providing passion for that idea. So when it gets passed to the second helper, which is your anima, you see down there at the bottom, the second helper, right after it's been challenged, it gets passed to the second helper. That is your anima. She's the gatekeeper. If it passes through the temptations and challenges because it's been protected by your inner masculine, she will accept it, and she will put that seed or that idea into the abyss, or into the self where her nest is, and this is where she does her work. If you notice, a seed is two things. The seed is death and it's rebirth, because the seed has to die. It has to split open and it has to die for the plant to emerge, for the seedling to emerge out of it. The seedling actually kills the seed and then it's reborn into something else. So in the abyss, in the self, in the nest, it dies as a seedling and it's reborn as a plant. And as it grows, grows through the transformation stage into the plant. And this is where the energy from the hero or the masculine sustains it along with the anima. They join forces and they transform that seedling into a plant. And then they protect it into the hero's journey until they get to atonement. Atonement is what? What phase is that? That is the fruit. That's the fruit. That is the last phase. That is the mature hero, or the mature fruit, the mature idea. once it's at this stage, that's when the hero is fully developed. And what does the hero do? It goes back into the known, back into the ego, where it can be used, where the hero can be used as a tool for good or for good or for whatever. And it passes back into the known through the ego, and then returns back out into what? Manifestation. Transform and change into the proper tool. It went from an idea to a manifestation. Every idea that you have, every passion that you have has to go through the hero's journey. And you have to be a strong enough inner masculine and a confident enough inner masculine, a mature inner masculine, to actually protect that idea and work with your anima. That when you can do that, you see billionaires, what's the difference between you and them? They have the passion, they have the drive, and they have the commitment to see an idea through. They are the mature masculine is the mature hero. And it walks these ideas through this because its inner masculine is mature, and it has a confident and a mature anima because it listens to her. It listens to her counsel. It listens to her intuition. That is your gut feel. Is your inner marriage strong? If your inner marriage is strong, you'll be successful at whatever you do. If your inner marriage is weak, then it won't make it through the hero's journey. It will get aborted. It won't make it through the challenge. It'll get killed by the enemy. It'll get killed by the opposing forces. But that's what strengthens, and that's what makes the viable hero on the other side. Here's another diagram of it in a different way that's a little bit more recognizable to the other diagrams that we have used. But you can see the steps are still the same. You can still see the outer world, or the known. It has to go into the shadow, and it has to be tested. And you can see the different commitments, or the different demons that are in the pit or in the shadow that challenge your ideas and your passions. And it takes the mature inner marriage to actually see your ideas and your passions past all these. And then, just like the other side of the other diagram, once it's in the pit and it's transformed, then it comes out the other side and into the usable world and out as a manifestation. Here's another diagram that I found about Star Wars. There's a few more steps, but the basic elements are still the same. You can see the call to adventure. You can see accepting the challenge, descending into the shadow, being challenged, being tested, being replanted and trained, and then resurrected on the other side as the hero, and then pushed back out to the returned as a mature hero and a viable tool for good. I know this has been a long episode, and I hope it was well worth it to stick with me through the whole thing. I started to break this up into 2 parts, but I didn't want to lose continuity. I hope it was worth waiting for. I hope you got a lot out of it, because there's a lot of years of insight that is simplified and displayed into this. I could go deeper, but that would take hours, and this is YouTube, so thanks for your indulgence. I don't know what's going to be next, but I hope this was well worth your time and your investment. And again, thanks to all the people out there that subscribe to me, and I hope that your faith in me and your trust in me was rewarded with this. So with that, I will close this out, and I will see you next time.